Hello, welcome to Bob's Dungeon. My name is Bob, I'll be your host. When West End Games had the license to make Star Wars role-playing games, they wound up making 3 different versions of that game. They had their first edition, core rules. Later on, they came out with a second edition version of the game, and their final go at it was they made a revised and expanded version of the second edition core rules. After that, West End Games went out of business, and so they no longer can make Star Wars role-playing games. But Wizards of the Coast picked up the license. And like West End Games, Wizards of the Coast made 3 different versions of the Star Wars role-playing game before they, in turn, let the license lapse. They had their regular Star Wars core rules. Then they made a revised version of the core rules, which added new things to it and clarified stuff from the previous one. Then their last go at it was they made a Saga Edition, where they changed things up a bit more. It still had a D20 system to it, but it was slightly altered. And this is what we're going to talk about in this video. The Saga Edition of the Star Wars role-playing game core rule book. This book has 286 pages and a copyright of 2007. It was published by Wizards of the Coast, and all of the artwork in this book is in full color and uses both pictures from the movie and drawn artwork. So let's go ahead and look at that artwork. All of the artwork in this book is in full color. It has artwork that is both drawn and captured from scenes from the movies. But whether it's drawn or a clip from the movie, all of the artwork goes a long way to setting a Star Wars feel and tone for this game. To play this game, what you're going to need is a copy of this core rulebook and a full set of dice. A full set of dice, which contains a 20-sided die, a 12-sided die, preferably 2 10-sided dice for rolling both percentiles and tens, an 8-sided die, a 6-sided die, and a 4-sided die. And character generation in this game is pretty much the same as you'd find in the other D20 versions of the Star Wars role-playing game. You, of course, have your 6 attributes, which are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. And you have the standard way to generate them, which is rolling 3 6-sided dice and putting them where you want after you add the dice together. And it also gives you some other options for generating the attributes, just like previous versions of the D20 Star Wars game, which is pretty cool. After you get your attributes generated, you're going to want to pick a species. And they give you a pretty good list of starting species for first level characters in this core book. And of course, where they make their money is you could buy other books which gives you more species that you can add as playable characters. And in this core rule book, the species that they give you at character creation are the human, the Bothan, the Surian, the Doros, the Ewok, the Gamorrean, the Gungan, the Ithorian, the Keldor, the Mon Calamari, the Quarian, the Rodane, the Celestian, the Trandoshan, the Twi'lek, the Wookiee, and the Zabrak. And that's a pretty good list. Classes is where you'll notice a big change from previous versions of the D20 Star Wars game. There are far less classes in this book. There are 5 core classes that you can choose from in this book. And they are the Jedi, the Noble, the Scoundrel, the Scout, and the Soldier. And each of these gives you special abilities and stuff like that as you gain levels. And each of them have several talent trees attached to them. And as you first level character, you pick 1 talent from the talent trees available. And each odd level after that, you get to pick another talent from the talent trees, which gives you a variety of how characters can turn out. So you could have like 3 scoundrels, or a group of soldiers, or several Jedis as player characters, and they can each pick different things from the talent trees, which will give them a different array of what they can do in the game. So you have different things that the characters can do, even though there's the same class, which is pretty cool. A lot of options there, a lot of customizability. Another place where this differs is the saving throws. It no longer uses the term saving throws. It still has reflex, fortitude, and willpower, but these are now called defenses, and they work a little bit differently than saving throws. Your reflex defense replaces armor class, so all attacks made to your character is against your reflex defense. Your fortitude defense protects you against poisons, diseases, and radiation, stuff like that. And when those things are attacking your character, they roll against those defenses. Then you have your willpower defense, and it's used to defense against certain force powers and other mind-altering effects that would attack your character. They have to work against your willpower defense. So that's kind of nifty. You also have a damage threshold for your character. And the damage threshold gives a certain amount of damage that your character can take that would potentially knock him out or even kill him without depleting all of his hit points. So it can make combat move along a little bit faster if that happens. You also have a condition meter, a condition track on your character sheet, so that as you take certain amounts of damage or different types of damage, your character will be affected more and the things he does by taking negatives, and it can lead on up to unconsciousness. So that's kind of nifty. You also have a second wind, and a second wind will revive a number of hit points either equal to your constitution or a quarter of your max hit points when you lose half your hit points. And it uses whichever number is greater. So that's a change as well. And the skills in this game, when you look at the skill chapter, the skills, there are far fewer skills in this book than in previous versions of the D20 Star Wars game. And what they did was they condensed the list so certain skills are now used in the place of other skills, and it gives you the laydown of what skills you use for different tasks. And this way you don't have so many numbers that you have to go through on your character sheet, and it makes things easier to keep track of, which is kind of nifty. The Force, there's a chapter on the Force in this book, and the Force is a little different. You get Force points, and they're spent exactly the same as in previous editions. You spend a Force point and get to add a number of 6-sided dice, depending on your level, to whatever task you're trying to perform. And the way you gain them is different. A starting character at first level gets 5 Force points, and each level he gains 5 new Force points plus half his new level. And any Force points he didn't spend from the previous level are lost. So that's kind of cool. You have different Force powers in this game that you can gain, and Force talents, and different ways of using the Force, and it covers it all in the Force chapter in here. It sounds a little confusing when I talk about it, but it's pretty simple. It's pretty cool. You also have an optional rule of destiny in this game, and the destiny would be something that your character is destined to, kind of like Anakin in the movies was destined to bring balance to the Force, and we all know how that turned out. And you gain a destiny point each level to spend to help you survive to meet your final destiny. And it's an optional rule. You don't have to pick a destiny if the Game Master decides to use it, or the Game Master can assign it, or you can pick your own. It's all optional. But it gives a different dimension to the characters. It gives you something else to work with. And that's pretty much it for character creation. They kept the way multi-classing works from the other editions, so that when you gain a level, instead of gaining a level in the same class, if you wish, you can gain a level in another class, which is really cool and can give you more variety to your character. And they also have an entire chapter devoted to nothing but prestige classes for this game, and there are quite a few prestige classes in this book, and they work the same way as before. If you meet the requirements when you gain a new level, instead of gaining a level in your same class, you can gain a prestige class, provided you meet the requirements. The prestige classes they have to offer are the Ace Pilot, the Bounty Hunter, the Crime Lord, the Elite Trooper, the Force Adept, the Force Disciple, the Gunslinger, the Jedi Knight, the Jedi Master, the Officer, the Sith Apprentice, and the Sith Lord. So you got a lot to choose from as far as prestige classes go in this book. This book has a chapter devoted to equipment. It has pretty good selection of equipment, cybernetics, and so forth. A chapter devoted to vehicles. A chapter devoted to spaceships and travel through space. Gives you a little lowdown on a few locations, and they saved most of that for purchasing in other books, which is alright, I guess, if you're willing to do that. And it has a chapter on game mastering, tells you how to run the game. A chapter on combat, tells you how to run combats. Has some adversaries you could use for your game, other species that you can encounter, other alien creatures, and everything you need to run the game is in here. It comes with a pull-out poster map, so that if you want to use miniatures for your game, you could. And in the very back of the book, it has a character sheet that you could photocopy and use if you wanted to. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's got everything you need to run the game in here. Which brings me to 3 questions. Would I play a character in this game? Yes, I would, and yes, I have. I've only played a character in this game once, and I had a blast doing it. And so I would play a character again. Would I run this game? Unfortunately, I have not had the opportunity to run this game, but if I could find a group willing to play it, I would probably run it in a heartbeat. Would I recommend this version of the Star Wars game? Yes, I would. Out of the 3 versions of the Star Wars role-playing game that Wizards of the Coast put out, this one is probably my favorite. To me, it feels more like Star Wars than the other 2 they put out. The other 2 were good, but they feel more like a science fiction version of Dungeons & Dragons to me than Star Wars. This feels a little bit more like Star Wars to me. And the weird part is, I think, personally, when they came out with 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, if they had gone the route that Saga Edition went, instead of the route they went with the game, 4th edition probably would have stuck around a little bit longer. But they did what they did, and when 4th edition started to fail, they decided to double down on 4th edition and put all of their resources into it, and they let the license to produce Star Wars role-playing games lapse. And then after that, 4th edition, not surprisingly, failed completely, and they went to 5th edition. And another company bought the license and is now making Star Wars role-playing game material, which is kind of nifty. We'll talk about those soon enough. And that's pretty much all I have to say about the Saga Edition of the Star Wars role-playing game. Thank you for joining me at a look at this book, and hopefully you'll join me next time, where we'll talk about something else. Bye.